decided, Vicky. We'll put the apartment in Mom's name, and then we'll move in with her. That's it. Final. Michael stated flatly, his tone devoid of inflection, like a news anchor reading a teleprompter script about market fluctuations. There was no emotion, no room for debate. Decided how? She froze by the window, the sensation not unlike a sudden, shocking plunge into icy water. Wait, what do you mean, it's decided? He merely shrugged, a casual, dismissive motion as he leaned back in the sleek modern chair. Just what it sounds like. Her neighborhood is getting unpredictable, questionable characters. Our building has security, guarded parking, cameras on every corner. She'd be safer here. And we'll stay at her place. More space, a better zip code. It elevates our profile. And who's going to make me feel safe, Mike? She took a step closer, her eyes glittering with a sharp, unshed light. This is our home. We picked it out together, remember? Every little thing in here is us. That shelf we argued over, the curtains we hung crooked the first time, even that stupid hairline crack above the chandelier. Her voice caught. She wanted to say, we built a life here, but the words crumbled in her mouth. He stood across from her, a stranger, impeccably dressed, smelling of some exclusive citrus and sandalwood cologne. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom negotiation, not from sharing a bed for the last decade. It's just square footage, Victoria, he said with a faint, condescending exhale. Don't be so dramatic. It's an asset, and we need to manage it wisely. You're a grown woman, but you're reasoning like a teenager. An asset? A short, brittle laugh escaped her, tinged with hysteria. Michael, do you hear yourself? A home isn't an asset, it's our life. He offered a thin, patient smile, the kind reserved for a slow student who just can't grasp a simple equation. Sentimentality, it's a useless currency. In that single second, a current of pure, cold realization jolted through her. She didn't recognize him, not his gestures, not the detached coolness in his voice. This wasn't her husband. It was a strategist, an accountant, coldly endorsing the liquidation of a shared history. I won't agree to this, she said, her voice quiet but gaining a new, steely resonance. I'm not asking, he replied calmly, as if stating the weather. I'm informing you. The papers are with the attorney. They'll call soon. He picked up his leather briefcase and left. The door clicked softly behind him, not a slam, but a precise, definitive sound that felt infinitely worse. Victoria remained standing in the center of the living room. The space suddenly felt alien, staged. Even the mug of tea on the table seemed to have gone cold in fright. She sank onto the sofa and stared blankly at the ceiling. That crack, they'd once joked it was their family seal, a flaw that made the place theirs. Now it was just a defect, a blemish, like their marriage. The memory of last week's dinner at her mother's house surfaced with painful clarity. She saw it all now, the carefully laid groundwork. Eleanor had greeted them as usual, in a flawlessly pressed silk robe, hair in a perfect silver bob, her expression one of perpetual, weary tolerance for the world's inefficiencies. Finally, she'd said dryly, I'd begun to think you'd stand me up. Her apartment was a museum of polished surfaces, smelling of lemon wood cleaner and the faint, enduring scent of vintage perfume. The air was stifling. Victoria always felt the urge to cough but suppressed it. It would be an admission of weakness. Michael had immediately shifted, his posture becoming somehow both smaller and more self-important, the prodigal son returning to the Queen Mother. "How are things at the firm, dear?" Eleanor asked, ladling a thick soup into porcelain bowls. "Stressful, I imagine. The weight must be immense. I've always said a man's home should be a foundation, not a distraction." The words were dropped softly, each one a precisely aimed stone. Victoria felt the implication and tightened her grip on her spoon. "We're fine, Mother," Michael had rushed to say. "Victoria manages." "Manages," Eleanor had repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it bland. Well, managing is the bare minimum. A woman should be an inspiration, you see. A man needs to feel supported from behind, not burdened. Victoria had bitten her tongue. Arguing was a battle lost before it began. Eleanor had smiled then, a cold, narrow-eyed gesture. My friend Margaret was telling me her son just traded his condo for a larger one downtown, made a brilliant financial move, so savvy, and here you two are, still in that little two-bedroom, cramped for a young couple, but for someone like me, it would be perfect. Quiet, respectable neighbors. Victoria looked up. You're serious? Why wouldn't I be? Eleanor shrugged lightly. We're family. We must think of what's best for our elders. You're young, Victoria. You can adapt. It's harder when you're alone at my age. Michael had stayed silent. He only cleared his throat and studied his soup as if it held the answers. Right then, Victoria felt the trap snap shut. The conversation was already over. She just hadn't been given the memo. The drive home had been silent. No jokes, no casual let's get ice cream. He had been pensive, closed off. The next morning, he looked at their apartment not with affection but with the appraising eye of an assessor. The night after the conversation stretched long and bleak, like a relentless late autumn downpour outside. He'd locked himself in his study, the sharp snick of the bolt echoing through the empty rooms. She lay in the dark, listening to the rhythmic ticking of the hallway clock. Each second whispered, "It's over." He used to curl into her in his sleep, his breath warm against her neck. Now there was only silence and space. She thought of the beginning, hunting for this place, arguing over kitchen cabinet finishes, eating takeout on the floor surrounded by boxes. He'd been different then, quick to laugh, alive, real. He said, "We'll fight and make up on this very floor." Where had that man gone? Ever since his last promotion, he'd become a stranger. Everything was leveraged assets, quarterly projections, performance metrics. With friends, with colleagues, he was animated. With her, he was a spreadsheet. And now this. We'll give the house to Mother, delivered as dryly as a proposal to replace office furniture. She couldn't bear it. She got up, padding to the kitchen for water. That's when she saw it, a sliver of light under his study door. He was still awake. His phone lay on the chair, tucked in the pocket of his discarded suit jacket. The screen pulsed with a notification, a silent, beckoning flash. She hesitated for a long minute, warring with herself. Then she picked it up. The screen was locked. Password. She typed their wedding date. It unlocked. Messages. The most recent were from Mom. Mom. Did she agree? Michael. No, it doesn't matter. She'll sign. Mom. You must be firm. This is for your future. She needs to understand her role. Michael. She will. Her heart gave a single hard thud against her ribs. She needs to understand her role? Hands trembling, Victoria scrolled up. Mom, once this is done, you can finally breathe. You'll be free of that dead weight from your past life. It's all for the best. Dead weight. There it was. Not a wife, not a partner, ballast. She placed the phone back exactly as she found it, moving slowly as if handling a detonator. In that moment, everything crystallized. She wasn't his wife. She was a piece in their transaction, a signature on a form, a means to an end. She looked up at the closed study door. Behind it sat the man she'd once loved. Now he was just the opposition. The next morning, Michael left for a business trip without a word. Victoria sat at the kitchen island staring at his half-full coffee mug and thought, 15 years, and all I'm left with is a cold cup and the silence. She went to the antique dresser, pulling out her grandmother's wooden trinket box. Inside was an old, faded letter from her grandfather. The smell of aged paper and ink hit her, a scent that always tugged at her heart. A home, my dear Victoria, is not the walls or the roof. It is the people within it and the love between them. As long as that memory lives, the house lives. She read it and wondered, but what happens when the love is gone? Does the house die too? With these heavy thoughts, she stepped outside. The crisp air stung her cheeks. The city smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. Her fingers, moving of their own accord, dialed her oldest friend, Chloe. "Vic, what's wrong? You sound hollow." And Victoria told her everything: the apartment, the texts, the calculated pressure. Chloe was quiet for a long moment. "Vic, listen, are you sure this is just about real estate? Something feels off. What if he's not just obeying Mommy Dearest? What if there's more? Debt? Bad investments? Something at work? You know how these corporate labyrinths are. Promise me you won't sign a single thing, okay?" Chloe's words lodged in her mind like a splinter. Not just Mom, not just an apartment. For the first time, Victoria considered that she might be fighting a shadow she couldn't yet see. Alone in the apartment, the atmosphere shifted. The silence was no longer oppressive, but charged, as if the rooms themselves were waiting for her next move. She walked through them slowly, the kitchen, the living room, their bedroom, all familiar yet foreign. In the living room corner stood a large, ugly Chinese vase he'd insisted on buying. She knew he kept a spare key behind it. She sat at the desk, the burner phone in her hand. She remembered a notification she'd glimpsed. Azure Boutique, $7,500, gift for partner's wife, discretion required. It wasn't for her, it was never for them. A new, cold resolve settled over her. She needed to see the whole board. With shaking hands, she called Olivia, a woman she'd previously known only as the polished, reserved wife of Michael's senior partner. "Hello?" The voice was smooth, surprised. "Olivia, it's Victoria, Michael's wife. We need to talk. It's urgent." An hour later, Victoria sat on a pristine white sofa in Olivia's sun-drenched loft. The space was minimalist, filled with light and green plants. A porcelain cup of tea steamed untouched between them as Victoria's story spilled out in fragmented, breathless sentences. Olivia listened intently, her expression unreadable. When Victoria finished, she spoke softly. "You think he's having an affair. I thought, maybe, I don't know anymore." "No, Victoria," said Olivia, her smile tinged with profound sadness. "It's more banal and in some ways more grotesque. His mistress isn't a person, it's money, and my husband is his eager partner." Victoria went very still. "What? How?" "Our husbands," Olivia explained, her fingers lacing together tightly, "are running a scheme. Company funds are cycled through shell corporations, returned as performance bonuses or hidden in property flips. It's legal on the surface, a masterpiece of loopholes. Your property exchange is a single move in that game." The floor seemed to tilt. "But we have everything we need." "It's never enough for them," Olivia stated flatly. "It's an addiction. Your reluctance to play along is a problem. They need liquidity, and your home, your sentiment, is just collateral damage." The words hung, dense and poisonous in the air. Victoria returned home in a daze. The city's noise was a distant hum. One thought cycled relentlessly. "He didn't just betray me, he made me an unwitting accomplice." The next day, she began her own audit. First, his study. The door was locked. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. The vase, the key. Click. The room smelled of expensive leather and stale espresso. She went straight to the desk drawer, finding the secondary phone. She plugged it in. Password? Their wedding date. The screen lit up. The contacts were nearly empty, except for one unnamed number. The last text? Meeting tomorrow, 5 p.m. at Azure. Don't be late. Azure, the boutique, the $7,500. At that exact moment, a banking alert flashed on the screen. Transaction $7,500, Azure boutique. She dropped the phone as if scalded. A wave of bitterness, rage, and utter desolation washed over her. Her grandfather's words came back. A home is not square footage. Alex was trying to turn their memories, their love, into a liquid asset to fund his secret game, and she was the obstacle to be removed. Something inside her shifted. The fear evaporated, replaced by a glacial, focused clarity. On Friday evening, Michael returned, his stride arrogant, assured. He moved past her toward his study. "We need to talk," she said, her voice calm and level. He turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Victoria, not now. I don't have time for another scene." "This isn't a scene. It's a negotiation you didn't see coming." She took a step forward. "Sit down." He sank onto the sofa, suspicion in his eyes. "I've considered your proposal," Victoria began, "and I've decided what to do with the apartment." "What is there to decide? It's settled." "No," she said, meeting his gaze directly. "Your mother is welcome to the spare room in her own apartment. I am staying here, in my home, the one you tried to turn into a bargaining chip." The color drained from his face. You have no idea what you're doing." "I have a very clear idea, Michael, and I'm done being a pawn." She walked to the door. "My attorney is expecting your call regarding the separation of assets. I suggest you keep it civil." She stepped out into the hallway. The cool air was a bracing slap. The door clicked shut behind her with a sound of finality. Hey, if you're invested in Victoria's fight for her home, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We dive deep into stories of resilience every week. And I'm curious, what would you have done first if you were in her shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The following days were a blur of focused action. The silence in the apartment was now her ally. Her first call was to a fiercely competent lawyer recommended by Olivia. "Good morning," Victoria said, her voice firm. "I need to initiate formal proceedings for the separation of assets and secure an immediate injunction on any property transfers. Full transparency, maximum legal pressure." The lawyer, impressed by her clear-headed direction, agreed immediately. A warm surge of agency, more therapeutic than any words, flowed through her. She methodically walked through the apartment, no longer seeing ghosts, but taking inventory. She rearranged the kitchen, reclaiming the space. In the bedroom, she changed the sheets, erasing the lingering scent of his cologne. Each action was a reclamation. Michael returned that night, his confidence visibly fraying at the edges. "We can still discuss this like reasonable people," he tried, a new, strained note in his voice. "Reason left the conversation when you started trading our life for a line of credit in your secret ledger," she replied, her tone chillingly even. "The discussion is now between our lawyers. I am not leaving." He flinched. For the first time, he was looking at her, really looking and seeing not the woman he could manage, but a force he had underestimated. The legal machinery once set in motion was swift. Victoria, with Olivia's silent guidance, pieced together a damning paper trail: shell companies, dubious consulting fees, the inflated and deflated values of properties. It was a house of cards, and her apartment was one of the foundational flakes. She met Olivia for coffee. No words were needed. They shared a look, a pact between two women who had seen the blueprints of their own betrayal. It's time, Olivia said simply. It's past time, Victoria affirmed. The final confrontation was anticlimactic. Michael stood in the kitchen, the same space where he'd delivered his ultimatum, now looking defeated. A court battle will be ugly, for everyone. It already was ugly, Victoria said, looking out at the city lights from her balcony. The difference is, now I see it clearly. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. Are you? He had no answer. The man of spreadsheets and schemes was outmaneuvered by truth and consequence. Later, her lawyer called. The injunction was secured. The apartment was frozen as a marital asset. He couldn't touch it. Victoria leaned back in her favorite chair, a profound, quiet lightness filling her chest. She had won, not with screams, but with strategy, not with pleas, but with proof. She stepped onto the balcony. The autumn chill was invigorating now. The city glowed below, a tapestry of lives and stories. She smiled a small, private smile. Her home was hers. Her life was her own. And she understood deep in her bones that you could lose trust, survive deception, and walk through the fire of betrayal. But if you held on to your core self, no one could ever foreclose on your freedom. She was home, and finally, she was also home within herself.